I'm going to hit live here. All right, so everything should be live now. We're going to be working on real quick AI, I suppose, and this is actually something I wanted to do yesterday, but the leaderboard took substantially longer than I expected. So we're going to knock out the AI today. Now, the AI is going to be server driven. It's artificial intelligence. The player won't really have much control over it. So we're going to go ahead and just run that on the server because that's what makes the most sense, right? Now, with that said, what I'm going to do as far as designing it is I'm going to design it without any authority checks, I guess, and I'm gonna make it so that it attacks anything which doesn't share the same connection as it. Basically meaning it'll see anything as an enemy that's not opposed to its owner. So let's go ahead and start with a script, I suppose. I'm gonna make a new one here, and I'm just gonna call it pet. And I'm actually going to take a look at my combat script here. Just pull this down a little bit. So when you're coding, it's generally good to reuse code whenever possible. Now this combat script is good for the player because it checks for authority, it checks for attack input, it checks to make sure fire time is met. This is all very good for the client, but I want to somehow expand this to also work for AI so I don't have to rewrite the code entirely, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this entire script. Actually, I'm going to move this up here. There we go. Now I'm going to copy this entire script. I'm going to go back to my editor. I'm going to actually rename this here to player combat. I'm going to rename the class too. All right, now I'm going to make a new script and I'm going to call it combat. So I basically told one to player combat, the class and the file, and then I made a new one called combat, which I'm just going to paste in the old code. Now I'm going to go to player combat, and it's going to inherit from the combat class. Now, part of the issue here is there's a lot of redundancy. So if it's actually telling me here that the field name is serialized multiple times in its class or parent class. Basically what that means is that I have projectile VFX serialized in player combat, and as well the class it's inheriting from, which is regular combat. So I only need it in one of those, and I'm just going to do all that in the combat one. So I'm going to get rid of this, and it should throw some errors, which is fine. It's basically saying that this is inaccessible due to its protection level because this is now a private class, but it's not part of the player combat. So all I'm going to do is just do base dot hit VFX. So I'm basically just renaming it and putting base in, indicating I want to pull it from the parent class, and there's still going to be an error. Let's just disregard that for a second. And then base dot projectile VFX. Now I'm going to go back to my combat class here, and I'm just going to make a protected game object projectile VFX get return projectile VFX. Basically, it's just going to return whatever's in the parent class, and I could very well make this protected and then just do this too, which is fine if that's what you want to do. I probably will actually do that just to make the code a little easier for everyone else. So let's go that route instead. So I'm going to make this also protected and I'm going to make that capital. So the next attack time is used to check for attack time or fire time met. Again, that's something I'm gonna need protected or accessible from the actual player combat script. So I'm gonna do public, or sorry, protected float, next attack time, and I'm going to rename it, of course. Colliders within this object, I'm not sure if I need that yet. Network animator, I'll probably keep that a private. I might have to revisit that. All right. So here's a very important lesson with Unity in general, and I know that this isn't really networking related, but this is still very useful. So this was a private void awake, but the issue is a lot of times is that if this is an inherited class, the Unity methods won't call. So like the awake, update, etc. So what you have to do is you have to actually make them either protected or public. And then on the topmost class, so basically the combat class, make it virtual. I'm gonna do the same thing with update. And then you need to go back to whatever class inherits those. So this is the player combat. And you'll see I got these little squigglies basically saying that it expects an override, but it's not an override. So now I'm gonna override it. I'm gonna call base.awake. Get rid of this, and again, protected override, and then base.update. Okay, so I don't think I need these here. I don't think I need that, and I am going to get some errors here. That's fine. What I'm doing essentially, if you're new to this sort of thing in general, is this combat is encasing the majority of the work I need. So I'm going to get a lot of the details from this class here rather than the player combat one. So what I need to do is I actually need to make this protected because I want to access this from the player one. And check attack, I feel like this would probably be different for AI versus player-owned objects. So I'm going to leave that as it is for now. The command attack is only going to be used on the player because the AI, like I said, is going to be run on the server. So I don't actually need that on the base one. RPC attack is to send it to all clients to spawn a projectile. For now, we'll leave that private. Got to update this. Got to update the spelling on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and go down to my player combat, and I'm going to delete a lot of this stuff because it's already in the base class, and I don't think I need this either. And I probably will need this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to combat. I'm gonna actually come back to that because it's kind of eh. So what I basically did was I tore apart. You know what? I'm sorry to do this to everybody, but I realized that what I'm doing right now is how I would normally code, and basically I'm trying to organize everything and make it really efficient and stuff. But while doing so, I realized that it's becoming really confusing for everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Z all of this, except this. I'm going to paste that back, and I'm going to basically just delete this and do something different because I realize that it's probably not, it's probably a bit excessive for what you want to do, and it's probably affecting the learning curve quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and delete player combat and just keep the combat one, and basically where we are where we started. So let's just make sure I didn't screw anything up. I got some errors all taken care of. Let's make sure it's still on the player. Missing scripts. That's just the combat script, which is missing. So I'm gonna get rid of that. Add it back. Okay, sorry about that, but I realize I'm going down a path that I probably shouldn't go down for a beginner series. So I just wanted to kind of, stop right there. Let's go ahead and just instead, let's make the player, let's just duplicate the player prefab here and let's drag it up. I'm actually gonna delete that duplicate here and unpack this. This is just gonna be a pet. So I'm gonna zoom in on my pet here. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to have a network animator on the pet or an animator on it because it doesn't really need it for this example. Pets are not going to have health. We'll make them untargetable. Yeah, I know, but that's part of the thing is if I went slower, it would take a really long time to cover. So I'd rather just go around that entirely. So I'm deleting the camera setup because it's a pet, it doesn't need it. It's not an owner object, so I'm gonna delete that script. It's not a player, so I'm gonna get rid of the player name. All I really need is the network transform, but again, I said this is gonna be server controlled, so I'm going to uncheck that. The motor is going to be an AI motor, so I'm gonna get rid of that one instead. And the combat script is gonna be different too, so let's get rid of that as well. All right, so visuals. Let's get rid of the canvas and the camera because that's not needed anymore. We do need some kind of new visuals, so I'm just gonna make a new one. Why don't we just make pets a cube, I suppose. Let's make them a cube. Let's put the cube down a tiny bit so it's kind of at the base here. All right, and I'm gonna need a new material because I don't want it to be blue as well. Let's just drop that on there and let's just color it something else. Let's just go with kind of like a bright yellow. All right, so the pet is gonna be the cube and I'm going to put a face on it just like the other one. I'm going to use a spear for the face. Just pop it out like that. And the lighting is making it kind of hard to tell if it has the right colors, but it does not. So let's drop that on there. And I don't really care if things pass through the pets right now, because I say in most games they probably don't. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove all the colliders and whatnot. Plus, well, I'm gonna add a character controller to it, and that's probably going to affect the collision anyway, but anyway, moot point here. So I know a cube is one block. So the height needs to be 1, and this should be drawing, there we go, this should be drawing my gizmo, but it didn't look like it was, but here it is. So we have the gizmo up here, but it's a little too high. So I'm just gonna move the height down a little bit. So -0.5, there we go. That'll put our block on the ground just fine. It's not to minimize code on the networking side, it's to minimize code in general. And it's also so that you can reuse a lot of code. It's more about reusing code and making everything function through the same code, which minimizes code, which makes it easier to debug, makes it more reliable. Generally, it's just an all-around better practice when possible. It can get out of hand if you do it too much, but more often than not, if you're only going like 3, I usually recommend staying 3 deep at most. Generally, if you're 3 deep, that's fine. Not excluding like not including network behavior. Now let's go ahead and go to my scripts, go to units. I'm gonna copy this whole folder. I'm gonna just call it AI. And I'm gonna have a lot of errors because the script names are the same, that's fine. Like I said, pets aren't going to have health. So I'm gonna get rid of the health ones. Player name is gone. I need to make this a prefab though before I accidentally destroy it. There we go. And combat script is going to be different. So let's just rename this to pet combat. We're not going to do any visual effects. We're just going to have the pets actually walk up and attack things. That will make it a little bit, a little simpler, right? Because we're not going to deal with the raycast and all that stuff. We don't need colliders. We don't need the animator because we got rid of that. Okay, so here's the tricky part, I suppose. And it's not really that tricky, but here's where I was talking about is I want to make this server controlled. Now I can still give a player authority over this object if I want, and that way the player could issue commands to it if I wanted. That would be fine. But yeah, I think I'll go ahead and do it that way, just because that's probably how most of you will be doing it. So let's do this here. So let's see, if, let me make an update here. If base is server, check attack. So even though a player can own this object, I still want to run the checks on the server because it's AI. I'm gonna have the server do all the work. So first, beyond that, instead of doing key down checks, there's no reason to do that because it's going to be run on the server. So what I'm going to do is if base.connection to client equals null, then return. And what this basically means, if no player owns this object. If there is a player owning the object, then this will not be null. So just keep that in mind. Next I have if fire time met. So if fire time's not met yet, then go ahead and return. However, the issue with this is that looks like I have it reset time. Looks like I thought I hadn't added that in to where it only resets the attack time if I tell it to. So I'm just going to set that to false. I don't want it to reset the attack time if it's, you know, if I'm not ready to actually attack the player. Now the next thing to do is get rid of this, get rid of the attack. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to find targets by just using a cast, basically like an overlap. So private network identity target, current target to attack. All right. So what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to put this down here. I'm going to do, let's see, private bool trace for targets. I'm going to do a quick if not trace for targets, then return. I'll explain what this does in a second. All right, so what this is going to do is it's going to trace for targets in the area, and if a target is found, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. In addition to that, it will also set the target up here. And we're going to use this just to move towards the target later. So we could probably do that inside this one method, but I'm not going to because that's cluttering code. So let's do a quick serialized field here. I'll just do detection range, and I'll just set it to something crazy like 50. How far enemies can be detected. There's probably something else I should do. Scan interval. This is how often to check for closer enemies. So I actually already need to just kind of move this out of here, and I'm just going to make a new method called private actually gonna go ahead and just make this a void. All right, so I'm pulling the trace for targets out of the check for attack, and I'm calling that individually under update if server. And what I'm going to do now is basically do if time.time is greater than, I forgot another variable. Okay, so we got next scan time, which is the time that the AI can search for enemies. So I'm actually do if time.time is less than next scan time, then return, do nothing. I'm gonna do next scan time equals time.time plus scan interval, basically making it so that it can only spear cast every scan interval instead of every frame, because every frame will destroy your performance pretty quick, especially if you have like a lot of AI or whatnot. So now I'm just going to do a, I guess it'd be collider hits equals physics.overlap spear from transform.position using detection range. And I don't think I actually have a layer for my players. I'm almost certain I don't, and that's fine if I don't, but I do not. All right, so I'm gonna use the default layer. What I'm doing basically is I'm just doing an overlap from wherever the pet is, and let's say the range is, let me just move the pet here, drop in a player. Let's say the range on the pet is 50 units, and that's like way out here. So if this player is in range, this is going to be one of the objects it's going to hit, because that's just how normal physics overlap works. And it's also going to hit the terrain because the terrain is on the same layer. So if you want to filter layers so you can only hit players, which I would strongly recommend doing, you would definitely do that. But as my boss liked to say, do it on your own time. So not something I'll be covering right now. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this pet class real quick just because the errors are bugging me. And I have the motor class too, so I'm gonna ignore that one for now. I do need to rename the combat class though, under AI. There we go. All right, so as I was saying, we're gonna trace for things in the area. Normally I'd probably, on top of layers, I'd probably also use an interface to see if it's something I could target. I won't be going into that because that's kind of a little out of scope here. And one thing I want to point out is you're gonna notice that a lot of this coding that I'm doing is not network specific. A lot of what I'm doing is designing the game normally like I would for offline, and honestly, that's how a lot of networking is. It's not that different from making an offline game. The only thing is you have to just make sure that you run code on the correct side. So you got to make sure that like you're running server things on the server and client things on the client. That's honestly the tricky part. But the code for the most part is going to be relatively the same. So let's go ahead and just cycle through these hits here. So I'm gonna do for i.hits.length, and on every hit I'm going to do health h equals hits i.get component health. Now you may have noticed that, or recall I should say, that I removed the health script from my pet because I don't want pets to be targetable. I've decided that in all my laziness, what I'm going to do is if it has a health script, it can potentially be a target, and the players do have health scripts. So that's how I'm determining if I can attack it or not. A layer would definitely be way more efficient, like casting on a specific layer, but that requires setting it up a little bit more, and I just want to kind of keep things simple. So I'm just going to find all objects in the area, and if they have a health script, then I know that they can possibly be attacked. Okay, so I'm going to also make a list here, I suppose. I'll just drop in the health script, I suppose. It doesn't really matter. So health, you can call this health equals new list health. I need to add the using the namespace. All right, so what I'm gonna do is if h dot connection to client doesn't equal null. So basically if it is owned by a player, in this AI example, I'm not going to target other AI, just players. So I'm gonna check if it doesn't equal null. So if there is actually an owner, which would be a player, and if h.connection to client doesn't equal base.connection to client. So basically what I'm doing is if this health script has an owner and that owner is not the owner of this AI, that's essentially what's going on here. What I was going to do from here is basically make it so that if that is true, then it's a targetable unit, and I was going to add it to the health list, but I think there's actually probably an easier way. So I'm going to do health closest target equals null, and I'm going to do float closest distance equals -1f, and I'll get rid of this list. All right, so here we know that this is a targetable unit, so let's just add a quick comment, or a few comments, I suppose. If has an owner, and owner is not the same as who owns this AI. In other words, if it's a player, if it's an enemy player. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is if, let's do float distance actually, sorry, equals vector3 dot square magnitude. And we're gonna do h dot transform dot position minus transform dot position. And the reason I'm using square magnitude instead of regular distance is because it's actually quicker. It's about 5 to 15% quicker depending on your platform. So not always, sometimes it can be exactly the same performance as just using regular magnitude, which is the same as distance basically. But on some platforms it is quicker. So with that said, all I'm doing is I'm just trying to get the closest object. I don't actually need anything special from the distance other than knowing which is the closest. So in situations like that, you definitely want to use square magnitude. I'm just gonna get a drink real quick. Okay, so now I'm gonna do if closest distance equals -1, basically meaning it's not set yet, or if distance is less than closest distance, then I'm gonna do closest distance equals dist, and closest target equals h. So that will find my closest target out of all of the objects hit by this here. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do network. What did I call that variable? Target. So I'm gonna do target equals closest target. All right, so if no targets are in range, what's going to happen is this is going to be null, and it's going to set the target to null, and that'll basically be true, because if something's not in range, you can't really target it. I just got a quick error here, and that's just because I haven't done net identity. So I'm just gonna do net identity there. I think I'd actually like to use the health on the target because I won't have to look it up every time. Actually, sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and still use the network identity on it. All right. So the target is basically the network identity on whatever is the closest target. And so we know that the trace for targets is true, and that should be working. Now, before I get too involved in writing this out, I'm going to comment out the check attack. And I'm going to instead, I'm going to comment this out too. I'm going to do move towards target. All right, so I don't have a method for that yet, of course. So I'm gonna do private void move towards target. All right, now I'm gonna do if target equals null, then return, because there's nothing to move towards, right? And now I'm going to do, let me actually set a move rate here. We're gonna make the AI pretty fast. We'll do 5F. All right. So I just set our move rate to 5F basically. And what I'm gonna do is if transform.position, actually I'm gonna do if vector3.distance transform.position compared to target.transform.position is less than, let's just say 1 unit, then return. So all I'm doing is if close enough to the target. This is gonna vary based on your hitbox size of your AI and your player and all that. But for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna only move them if they're, you know, more than a unit away. All right, so now I just need to do transform dot position equals vector3 dot move towards transform dot position target dot transform dot position move rate times time dot delta time. And I'm also gonna just make it look right at the target. So rotation equals quaternion dot look rotation. No, that's not right. It's transform dot look at. There we go. Target dot transform. That way we're just gonna look at it. We're not gonna smooth the looking. We're just gonna look right at it. Okay, that should work. Now, I'm gonna have to comment out all this stuff because I got a lot of errors here. And in order to test this, I need to get rid of those errors. So let's go to the AI folder again real quick. And I just realized I made the pet motor also in the pet combat script. So we don't need the motor script. Oh, you know what? I did make a small mistake, I'm sorry. I need to actually use the character controller to move. So let's just do that here. So what I would probably do, and I'm gonna actually do that now, just because this doesn't need to per se be a network behavior because I won't be actually using any. Actually, I will be using checks. I lied. So I'm gonna go to back to the combat here. I'm gonna get rid of this here, and I'm gonna do the move towards target. And I'm just gonna move that to the pet motor class. So I'm gonna do update if base.is server. I said if is server, then move towards target. I'm not using the animator. I'm not using rotation rate. I am using the move rate. I said that was going to be 5F. And I'm going to get rid of the move rate here. I'm going to copy this method. So what we just wrote, basically, I'm just going to pop it into the motor script. And I'm going to just basically move towards the direction of the player. I'm gonna have to change that in a second. One thing I do have to do though is go to the pet combat here, and under target, I'm gonna have to make this public. So I'm gonna rename it to a capital T. And I only want target to be settable in the pet combat, so I'm gonna make it public target get private set. And now what I'm gonna do is in my pet motor class, which I still need to rename the file, so please don't let that confuse you. Private pet combat equals null by default. Any questions, by the way? If you have questions along the way, just let me know. Don't hesitate to ask. So I only need the character controller and the combat script if I'm the server. So I'm gonna just do it, override onstart server, and pet combat equals get component pet combat. All right, so like I said, this is gonna be entirely server driven, so I don't need this stuff. I do, however, need to do equals false. So basically, I'm gonna move this to awake. Basically, if this is a client, it's going to disable the character controller. But if it's the server, it's going to get the pet combat script because that's only used by the server. So let's go ahead and get rid of the onstart authority. It's not, doesn't apply. I'm going to do if pet combat.target equals null, then blah, blah, blah. I'm basically just changing all these target checks to the reference from my pet target. So in order to move on a character controller, you have to pass in the direction. You don't pass in the, per se, the actual positions. Let me just check something real quick. I don't remember if I added gravity. I did add gravity. All right, so let's just go back to my pet motor here. Okay, so I'm gonna do vector3 direction equals pet combat.target minus transform.position dot normalized, and I need to just put a bracket here. So this is going to be my direction to travel. Target dot transform dot position. Well, the first 10 minutes you missed me doing some fancy programming stuff that I decided to backtrack on because I realized it was a bit too complex for a stream, or didn't really need it. So this is just going to get the direction between the target and the AI, and it's going to normalize it, basically meaning it's going to, the sum of the values are going to equal 1, basically. And then I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do next. Rename it for consistency's sake. And then I'm going to add the gravity to it like before. And then I'm just going to do character controller dot move next. So I already talked about all this basically in the regular motor in the previous one. This is just going to, if it's already close enough to the target, it's going to exit. If there's no target, it's going to exit. And then it's just going to move towards the target using my move rate. I am noticing that I'm not passing in the move rate though. Yeah, so I need to do that. Okay, there we go. So don't need this one anymore. This is a separate script. I do need to just rename it though. This is basically the code I just wrote in Pet Combat, but I just moved it to its own motor script. Let's go ahead and rename that to Pet Motor. All right, so we still got some errors. Let's see what's going on here. Pet Combat's not using this per se. Get rid of it. It's not using that. It's not using that. I'm gonna keep it very simple here. Comment that out. Comment that out. I know you probably have no idea what I just did. I just commented and deleted a bunch of the projectile code from the previous pet combat because I haven't completed the script yet. So I'm just commenting it out so that it basically runs. So I got my pet here in the scene, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and add pet combat and pet motor. And I'm noticing, nope, never mind, everything's there. Pet doesn't actually do anything yet. Just get rid of it. All right, so the pet should only move, it should only get a target if that, one, if it has an owner, and two, if the target is not the same owner as its owner. So what I expect here right now is basically whenever I join as a host, I expect the pet to not do anything at all. It is not doing anything at all, but it looks like I got a little bit of an error here. Let's just see what's going on with that real quick. Interesting. So what I forgot to do is I forgot to check for health. If H equals null, then continue. There's no reason to check if there's no health script. That was in the trace for targets, by the way. As I told you, I was only going to target things that have a health script. I forgot to check that if health doesn't exist, then to nullify it. So let's try it again. All right, so we got one null exception. Let's see what that's all about. Right. If closest target doesn't equal null, then I'm going to set it to the identity. Otherwise, I'm going to set target to null. That was whoopsies. Basically, what I did here is before I was setting it to the net identity of the closest target, but in some instances the target wasn't found, so therefore it was throwing a null ref exception expected. So we got an error under pet motor that's being called on an inactive character controller. Now that's because I have this code here, because I'm starting as a client host, so I just need to do if not base is server, or there might actually be a if base dot is client only. There we go. If client only, then disable the character controller. Now let's go ahead and try again. All right, so the pet's actually chasing me around. It's on my butt right now. So it's following me, but I said earlier that the pet should only follow me if it has an owner. So I clearly messed up something, and it's probably something really simple. Now, the motor script only moves towards whatever the target is inside. This is the wrong motor script. Get out of here. The motor script only moves if there's a target inside the combat script. So this is what we're going to focus on. And this is the wrong combat script. Get out of here. Okay, here we go. It's only going to move if there's a target. So what's going on is some reason this is getting set. The target is when it shouldn't be. Now that's a pretty easy fix. All I forgot to do was basically if base dot connection to client doesn't equal null, then run these checks. Okay, so let's put a quick thingy down here. Let's put a comment. Only check for targets if AI has an owner. Simple enough, right? Because we talked about that if there's an owner, if someone has authority, then this won't be null. Otherwise, it will be null. So let's try one more time. Okay, so we're good. So the pet's behaving as expected. Now, what do we want our pet to do? I was thinking we would have the pet just go up to enemies and attack them, right? So the thing is, though, is that what is it going to do in the meantime? Is it just going to sit there? Or is it going to kind of follow the player around, or what? I mean, obviously it's not just going to sit there because that's going to look really dumb, right? So you probably want to you probably want to follow the player around if there's no target, right? So let's do that. Let's go back to the player, the pet motor here, and let's add another method here, move, because I feel like that's something you'll probably do too if this is truly a pet, is you want it to follow the owner around, right? So I'm gonna make a new one called move towards owner. I'm just gonna copy the move towards target and then just rename it. And okay, so if there's no target, then go ahead and exit the method. That's proper. I also want it to make it so that if there's no owner, to basically not move towards the target, because it can only attack if it has an owner. So I just copied that line, basically saying if no owner, exit. If no target, exit. And this is actually redundant because the target's only set if there's an owner, but these are two separate scripts, so kind of for the sake of clarity, I'm going to put that in there as well. Now I'm going to copy this, and under the move for owner, I'm going to just paste it in here, and I'm going to keep the if no owner exists and return, because obviously I can't move to an owner if there is no owner. But I'm going to do if target doesn't equal null, then return, because we have a target, we want to favor the target instead of the owner, right? So let's do if target exists, then return favor moving towards target. All right, so this is a bit more into the networking stuff. We're doing behaviors based on the networking, and again, this is all done on the server, so I'm just going to put these on here just to kind of indicate that they're done on the server. As you can see, I have the check here, and this is just to basically validate that for my sake, I suppose. Fire time met server, because this is all going to be server run. In reality, I could probably strip out a lot of this code if it's not being run on the server, but I'm not going to really do that, just not now anyway, because that's probably just going to be confusing. This doesn't need to be done either. This is what the projectiles, this is basically spawning projectiles for other players, but the pets aren't going to use projectiles. So I'll get rid of that. I don't want to jump around too much because it's probably, you're gonna be like, what? He just went from A to Z and I don't know what's in between. So we're gonna finish up the move to owner class here. So we're just gonna do if close enough. So we're going to keep in the close enough check, so basically it doesn't move too close to the owner. But in order to get the owner, we have to get the owner's player object. So we're just going to do client instance CI equals client instance dot return client instance, using the base.connection to client, which this will get my client instance for the player, for whoever owns this pet. I talked about this a million times in the past, told you how to be infinitely useful, and here we are using it again. So if CI doesn't equal null, actually it should never be null, so I'm not even going to run that check. CI dot, okay, so I actually need to get the player object on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to my client instance here, and I'm going to do public player spawner, I believe it was called. I'm going to see what that's called because I don't really remember what it's called. So under my client instance, it's called respawner. Okay, so public respawner, and I'm gonna make that get private set respawner on this object. And you'll see where I'm going with this in just a second. All right, so I'm actually gonna just make this like so, and I'm gonna make it private, and I'm gonna do a public static respawner, which is just going to get and return the instance. What am I making here for a typo? I'm just gonna do, oh, it doesn't like that. What am I missing? I'm having one of those moments. So get return. Oh, I'm dumb. I was putting an underscore in front of instance because normally I keep them private. Instance dot respawner. So this is just going to return the respawner on this object. You know, I hate to do it, but I'm just gonna go back to the way I had it. Sorry. Sorry. All right, so respawner is the respawner on the client instance, and then on the pet owner, I'm just gonna do if ci.respawner.current character equals null, then return if no owner to move towards, then exit. And now I'm gonna do is basically just take this and I'm going to do transform position. Instead of using the target position, I'm just going to use the current character.transform.position, and I'm actually only going to stay within 3 units. If close enough to owner, then return. Otherwise, I'm going to get the direction from the owner to the transform position. Again, normalize, etc., etc. Let me go over this again real quick. Basically, I'm getting the client instance, which is the owner of whoever's the same owner of this pet is. I'm going to get their local player object, which is a client instance, and I have a respawner script on it, which manages respawning for that player, and it has a reference to their current character, and that should be visible on the server and client. I've discussed that previously in the past. I won't be going back to that in this video. And then I'm going to compare the distance between the AI and the owner, and if it's close enough, it just won't follow. And then if it's not close enough, then it will move towards the owner. And pretty straightforward, right? So we have move towards target, where if there's a target, it will move towards the target as long as the target exists and as long as pet has an owner. And then there's move towards owner, which as long as there's an owner, and as long as there's no target, then it will move towards the owner. So we call both of those under update. Now we need to set an owner for the AI. That's going to be pretty easy. It's actually really easy, and this is probably something that I see a lot of people have issues with, or a lot of questions about said things. So I'm just going to go to AI, and I'm just going to make a new script. I'm going to call it, let's just say pet find owner. And this is going to be very simple. I'm probably going to put a collider on my pet. I'm going to make it a sphere collider, and let's make this radius like, where'd that go? That's probably bigger than I want. Let's go with like 7. Yeah. No, let's go with 4. Okay, so this is my collider on my pet. Basically, this is going to be a trigger. And whenever my player walks into this is when it's going to assign the pet. Really easy stuff. So I'm going to do a, this is another question that comes up a lot is, how to get triggers and colliders to only run on server or client. And what I will see a lot of time is something like this. I'll see void on trigger enter, for example, and then let's say I only want it to run on server, is I'll see something like that. Now I'm getting this error because I don't have network behavior. Okay, so the issue with this is two things. One, I said never depend on this attribute to stop when code executes. For all you that don't know, whenever you put server or server callback, it's basically supposed to mean that only the server can run that code. Whenever you put just regular server and you don't put callback at the end, it actually throws a warning. And that's why I'm putting it like this, is because I'm not going to put it on this method, but that's why on my other methods that only run on the server, I put this here because I want to know if I'm accidentally calling them from client or if I need to make changes in my code, for example. But another thing is this isn't reliable. Is depending on your editor version, this might behave differently and cause problems. It's not supposed to, but it sometimes does. So don't use this to control where code runs. Instead, do something like this. If not base is server, then return. Voila. Now this code will only run on the server. Now we're going to do a quick check. Private void check assign owner. I'm going to pass in the collider of other. And I'm just going to do check assign owner, passing in the other. I could just run all that code inside the trigger, but I like to separate stuff here. Checks if can be assigned to an owner. All right, so first of all, we're going to do if base.connection to client doesn't equal null, then return already has an owner. Not going to let other people steal pets. That is just wrong. So we're going to exit the method if there's already an owner. Next thing we're going to do is other. Actually, let's do health h equals other dot get component health. Let me just make some spelling corrections here and then add the namespace. I guess I should probably add namespace here. All right, so first I told you that only players are going to have health scripts, right? Normally you'd probably want to use like layer checking and things like that, but for the sake of simplicity, we're going to assume that only players have health scripts. So if we get this, then we know it's a player. We're going to do if h doesn't equal null, basically saying that if the health script exists. We're also going to do actually and h dot connection to client doesn't equal null. This indicates that not only is it potentially a player because it has a health script, but also if someone owns it. If someone doesn't own it, then it's probably not a player because it belongs to the server. So we're going to also add in that connection doesn't equal null thing. And if this is true, then all we're going to do is we're just going to do, I can't remember if this is under the identity or what. I'm going to do base dot net identity dot assign client authority. And then we're just going to do h dot connection to client. So all we're doing is if there's a health script and if that health script is a player of some sort, because there's someone has authority over it, then we're just going to assign authority of the pet to that player. And if you remember, all of my past pet scripts used the checks to make sure that they had an owner before they did anything. And by assigning authority, this is essentially given the client owner over the pet. Everything still runs on the server. This doesn't mean that the client can do whatever they want with the pet. It just means that it's basically binded to their connection. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to actually add in a .ai to the namespaces for the pet stuff. Or actually, I'll just change this to .pet. There we go. .pets, actually, plural. .pets. And lastly, pets. Microsoft actually recommends not using plural namespaces or structures, but I find there's less naming conflicts when you use plurals like that, so that's what I do. So if you're one of those people that are like, hey, you're not supposed to do that, well, I'm explaining why I'm doing that. So I'm going to drop on my pet find owner script. Now let's see. What should happen is right away is my pet should do nothing because, oh, I lied. My pet did something. We did get another error. Let's look at the error first and see what that's all about. Okay. So I forgot to check if the CI was null, which makes sense because the player hasn't spawned in yet. That's why you were getting that error. So the pet is moving to the player like right away, and it's not actually. Oh, did my pet break? That just seemed. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'm not sure if the player's too close or if there's a bug in the code. So I'm actually going to move the pet like way over here. And I noticed it stopped following the player, so that was unusual too. So it's moving towards the player right away, which is wrong. So I know it's not working, and it just stops moving. So something is definitely wrong. Let's go back to the pet motor and let's just comment out the move towards owner. This will verify that it's the move to owner part that's actually breaking, which I suspect to be true, and that is the case as well. Where is my look at code? Did I must have removed the look at code by mistake. It's no big deal. I'll just do transform.lookat petcombat.target.transform. This way it's looking at the target, and then I'm going to do the same thing here where it's just going to instead look at the owning player. Okay, so something's going on here. I fully expected this to be oh, my bad. So if I had it basically saying that if there was a owner, then exit method, when it should say if there's no owner, then exit the method. So let's just try it again real quick. All right, so it didn't move towards it. Where's my pet? Spinning in circles. Moving towards the pet very slowly. I'm gonna have to move it closer. You'll see as soon as I hit that range, the pet will start following me. All right, so this is actually working out pretty good, right? We have our pet here. Now, we don't actually have an enemy, so we don't know if that's gonna work. So let's go ahead and move the pet a little closer just so I don't have to run as much to get to it. Let's make a new build. It's finally time to see if all this is coming together. We still haven't added in the damaging stuff yet, but that's like super easy because we already have all the code for it. So I wanted to really knock out the more complicated stuff first. I'm just opening up multiple builds right now. All right, so move this over, Let me just run this as server. I'll test client host as well just to be thorough, but all right, I'm not giving the players names right now. So what's going to happen probably is I'm actually going to stop one of these clients. You're seeing two clients here because the camera's gone. There's not actually two clients. Don't worry about that. Like, I'll just close that out entirely just to get that out of your, out of sight, out of mind, right? So I'm going to go ahead and move, and the pet doesn't really have anyone to attack yet because there's no owners. You notice that when both players joined in, it just sat there, which is expected because there's no owners. Now I have the pet. The pet's going to follow me around. Let's join another client. All right, so the pet should have went after the other client, and I can see now that the pet's not even following me around anymore. So something's broken. Do we think that maybe, well, let's find out, because I'm not actually sure what could be broken. Might have been another dumb check here. All right, it is another dumb check. If no owner, then exit. Let's just try it again. I just copied and pasted, and I basically copied the mistake twice. So let's try it again. Again, I'm gonna connect the client. Where's that pet? Over here. I'm gonna go grab him. Got the pet. Now when I connect a new client, I imagine the pet's gonna go after him. There we go. Perfect. Bingo. All right, so now my pet is a vicious capsule seeking machine. Let's go ahead and add in some attacking stuff, which is going to be, like I said, really easy. The pet motor stuff basically moves to owner if there's no target. Otherwise, they'll move to a target if there's no, if there is a target, it'll move to the target. I could probably put this code relatively in the same method, just to, simplify it and just switch out where to move. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to keep it separated for now. Okay, so let's go back to the combat. Now, everything's done on the server side. There won't be any commands because commands is basically being called from the client to the server, so I'm going to delete that. This is where I trace for targets as to which to attack. Now I actually need to do the check attack method because I need to have my AI check if it can attack here. So the first thing, I'm going to uncomment all this and then look over it. All right, so if no player owns this object, it can't attack. That's correct. If target equals null, then return no target to attack. Okay, now we're going to do a quick check here saying if distance to target is not close enough, then we're going to not attack yet. So let's just do a private const float attack distance. We'll just say 1.5f. How close, let me just fix that. How close pet must be to attack. And I'm going to copy this. Private float target proximity. Again, this isn't really great naming or whatever, but you get the idea. How close pet can be to target. All right, so I'm going to go back down real quick, and we have some checks here. Let's make this public. Actually, let's make this private. Sorry. I'm going to take this and put it under the motor because it's the motor that controls the movement. And I'm going to go down to where it says move to target. And I'm just going to do target proximity. And I'm going to, for the sake of keeping things relatively the same, I'm going to do owner proximity. I'm going to just go down to the move to owner. And I'm just basically changing the hard-coded values to the constants, which are also hard-coded values, but now it's more clear as to what they do. Now, back under pet combat, I have attack, whoops, I just enlarged everything. I have attack distance, which is going to be how close the pet must be before it can attack. So I'm going to do a quick check here. If vector3.square magnitude, let's see, target.transform.position minus transform.position is less than attack distance times attack distance, then return not close enough to attack. All right, so you're probably like, why am I doing this attack distance times attack distance? A square magnitude check is much quicker than the vector3.distance check. I just talked about that, how it can be 5 to 15% quicker. It really depends on the platform though. So it might not be quicker on your machine, but it might be quicker on like a mobile device, for example. So I'm using square magnitude because that is inherently quicker, and basically to get the same distance for square magnitude is to do whatever distance times itself. So that's what I'm doing here. And this calculation costs like nothing. So end result, this is just going to be all around quicker. Now I'm going to remove the false flag, which basically means it doesn't reset the fire time when it's set to false. So as you can see, there's a reset time option. So I'm going to do if cannot attack yet. All right, now all we have to do is we know for here, if here can attack. All right, so we know for here that there's an owner for the pet, there's a target to attack, and it's close enough to the target, and there's enough time to attack, or between attacks rather. So at this point we can go ahead and attack. The target is a network identity. You can cache the health component if you want, because ultimately that's what I need to access, but I'm just going to grab it on the fly, for example, because this is only going to be done like once every second or so it's not really a big deal. Equals target dot get component health, and if h doesn't equal null, which there's no reason it should equal null, I'm going to go back to my regular combat script real quick just to see how I did it rather than guess. Okay, so all I did was basically just get the health script and then do deal damage. So I already have the health script, so I'm just going to do deal damage, and let's set it to like 10, but let's do I have an attack interval on here? I think I hard coded that. Did I? I don't know. Let's just make it a serialized field just for the heck of it. All right, so the attack interval is going to be how quickly the pet can attack. So I'm going to do next attack time equals time.time plus, it was already set to half a second, but now it's actually a variable. So we're going to do 10 damage, and like I said, all of the work for attacking is already done. So I just copy the code from where my client fires a bullet at the enemy, and I basically just pasted that inside the pet. And the really cool thing about this is, if you remember when we did the leaderboard, the whole reason we passed in the connection of the attacker or the owner of whoever shot the bullet is so that we can adjust kills on the leaderboard, right? Now the pet also has an owner, as we've been working around this whole time, is the pet will only attack if it has an owner. You could of course rip that out if you want, but the point of this is that the pet also has an owner, and whenever you deal damage to a target and you get the health script and whatnot, you're passing in the pet's owner. So why is that important? Well, let's go take a look. Let's go make some builds real quick. And did I don't think I have to add on any scripts. We'll find out. All right, so let's start this as server. Got my client over here. I'm gonna go fetch my pet right away. Move this one over here. I'm gonna go fetch my pet, and actually I'll go ahead and get him now. So I'm gonna get my pet. My pet's following me, and I'm gonna connect another client. He's gonna be in range, so the pet's gonna go after him immediately. Oh God, help, help, help. All right, so it's not working. There's no errors, but it's not working. What I expected to happen was that this player should be losing life, but he's not losing life. So I wonder if I forgot to make a call or something. Let me just go check real quick. Let me disconnect both of these. Oh, it's already done because I stopped. All right, did I forget to call check attack? No, I did not. No owner exit correct. No target exit correct. Not close enough to attack. Could that be our problem? Who knows? Let's just do the old lazy debugging. I don't expect this to take long. It should be pretty darn easy. All right, let's see what could be going wrong. Let's go back to server. Start it back up. Client. Just gonna move him over here. I'm gonna go get my pet. I'm lost. Where is it? There we go. Gotta go get my pet. All right. A, B, A, B, A, B, A, 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 A. Okay, what the heck happened? Oh boy. So let's see. Trying to scroll to where all the A's started. It just stopped working as soon as like it got to the enemy, which was weird. All right. I might have to. Okay, here we go. So yeah, nothing really. Let's go take a look at the code. Oh, I see. I made a mistake. A really silly mistake, actually. Let me just delete all this. All I did is basically I said if it's within attack range and exit the method. What I really meant to do is if it's out of attack range, exit the method. So if the distance is further than attack range, then exit the method. My bad. Okay, so let's try it again. All right, I'm just gonna move this guy and I'm gonna go get the pet over in this guy. I'm gonna name him. See, this is what I was talking about. You see how this is getting warnings? This is why I said I put them to make sure stuff's only being called on the right side. So that's useful for that. So I got the pet and the pet's going after my enemy. The enemy's still not taking damage, which is, I don't know what I did wrong now. So I'm gonna go find out why he's not taking damage. I'm going to ignore this warning for now. I'll come back to it. I don't think that's causing issues. So let's just do another debug.log. A, B, C. I know it's like something super obvious, but instead of staring at the code and trying to figure it out, I'd rather just type in debug things and hit play again. I feel like it's like a lazy approach, I guess. All right, so it's hitting B, but it's not hitting C. So what's going on? So it's saying the fire time's not met. Let's check this out. Okay, so basically, result is if time is greater than next attack time, and then it'll return true if that is the case, and it should be able to attack. If reset time is true, then it sets a next attack time to time.time plus attack interval. So what could be going on here? Let's go look at the next attack time. 0F, that's correct to start, right? So let's see, but this is returning if it's not met yet. I wonder if it's a calling at all. Let me just check something here. That is bizarre. I need to check the inspector. You know, I just realized is that I'm putting all of these things on here and I probably haven't applied any of it yet. Oh, I shouldn't have to because it's what? Dangling components. I shouldn't have to because it's in the scene, so I don't actually have to apply it. So this is allowing it to attack every half a second, but clearly something is being a little wonky in there. This is crazy. It's got to be something really dumb. All right, go get him. Go get him. All right, so it is actually hitting the player once, allegedly. I can actually see that the health bar looks a little different, so it did actually deal damage. So what's happening is it's probably just setting the next attack time wrong, which is kind of weird. Oh, why didn't anyone point this out? I put scan interval instead of attack interval. And I'm also assigning, oh, this is the wrong thing. Ignore me. I did actually use attack interval. Okay. So what is going on? Let me go look. Attack interval 0.5. This is something so dumb. I know it is. Yeah, I really like that waddle. It cracks me up. I'm getting truly annoyed with this not working now. All right, so oh, I'm an idiot. I wonder if this is an issue with the other one too. It probably is a bug in the actual client combat too. So basically what I should be doing is if result and reset time, basically indicating only reset the time if it has enough time to attack. Because what I was doing is resetting the time every single time regardless, so it was never actually achieving the proper time, which means this is probably doing the same thing. So let me just go over here. Yeah. All right, so just to recap what I fixed is before I was pretending this wasn't here, is I was basically getting the result that if time was past the next attack time, then it could attack. And then afterwards, I was increasing the next attack time. However, regardless of whether this is true or not, it was resetting the next attack time, so it was never actually getting to that time. So I just made it so if can attack and reset time, then go ahead and increase it, and that should fix it. So let's go ahead and try again. All right, gonna go get my pet. Pet's going after the enemy. Let me give myself a name. All right, so you can see the enemy is losing health, right? And the enemy respawned, and I got a point for when my pet took him out. So we know that the pet's actually dealing damage to the player, and it's actually giving the point to me. Therefore, I would say that it is successful. And I can also still shoot the... Oh, just kidding. Apparently I broke something. Yay. Oh, so what's going on here is I'm ray casting for objects, but I'm actually hitting my pet and the health doesn't exist because my pet doesn't have a health script. So that's something we should probably address real quick, right? So let's just close out of everything. And there was also a warning with setting the name. I can look into that in a second. So let's see, if health doesn't equal null and health dot connection to client doesn't equal base dot connection to client. Basically saying if health exists and the owner of health is not self, then go ahead and deal damage. Otherwise, I'd be dealing damage to my pet. We also got this thing going on here. I think this is just from old code. I'll look into that in a second. I would say that this tutorial is concluded though. I'm going to look into that error on the stream, just so I have everything done, you know, live. It's actually a warning, I suppose, but nonetheless. Now, let's say I don't have the pet and I have my 2 players named, and if I shoot this guy down to 0 life, I do get the point. That's expected. Oh, okay. Interesting. I can't move now. That was weird. That was really weird. Okay. So let's say I go get the pet now, and then the pet attacks my enemy. I can't shoot my pet now. And it seems to be working. I don't know what the deal is with that whole getting stuck thing. That was crazy. I can move now. I don't think it had anything to do with the network, unless it was because I set my name and then I couldn't move. I don't know. That was bizarre. I almost feel like the collider just got hung up on something. It was interesting. So the pet stuff works fine. It's all said and done. You also notice that the pet disappeared when I disconnected. If you would like to know how to make that from not happening, I suppose I can cover that real quick. That will require going into, actually that does get asked a bit, so let's go ahead and cover that real quick. That would be under my Getting Started Network Manager. And I'm gonna have to go to probably the server system callbacks. Okay, so this is where the player disconnects from the server. So what I'm gonna do is basically I'm gonna go through every object that the player owns. So I'm gonna do for i.con.client-owned-objects. Oh, it's a hash set. So I have to actually do this for each, what is it, a network identity? Yeah, network identity item in con.client-owned-objects. So basically I'm going to iterate every single object that's owned by the client when they're disconnecting. And I'm going to do if item.sceneID, what is this real quick? .sceneID is a ulong. Doesn't equal 0, basically saying that if it was in the scene ahead of time, then I'm going to do item.remove client authority. Now whenever a client disconnects, it's going to destroy all the objects they own as well when they disconnect. So all I'm doing is, if the object was in the scene ahead of time, then it's just going to remove authority before processing the disconnect, and that should stop it from happening. I don't need a new build for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up my old one and start the server. And now when I go over to the pet, okay, pet is following me, and I hit stop client. You can see that it's working, but I did, like, the pet's still there, but I got an error. It's not really a big deal. It's just saying that I modified the collection at runtime, which you're not really supposed to do. So technically I didn't modify the collection, Mirror did. So I'm just gonna do private list, network identity, remove ownership equals new list. Because basically what's happening is I'm removing the identity as I'm iterating the list, and that's causing Mirror to modify the client-owned objects list, and that's why it's throwing errors. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to do remove ownership.add item, and then I'm just going to do for I dot remove ownership.count, remove ownership dot remove, I dot remove client authority. So what I'm doing is I'm basically just storing it in another list that's not the one that's going to be modified, and then I'm going to iterate that second list. And now we should be good. Let's try it one more time. Server, client, change my name, gonna have to fix that. Moving towards the pet. Pet's following me, gonna hit stop client. Pet's still there, so if I reconnect, trying to find it, there we go. And if I go to the pet, I could pick it back up, and another player could pick it up too, and so on, and so the cycle begins. So yeah, the pet's working. Everything's good to go with the pet. It attacks, it passes scores to the owning player. It follows owners. Everything's working about the pet. And with that said, this stream is more or less done. The only thing I'm going to do is address this right here. This looks like it's probably a side effect from something else. So I'm just going to take a quick look at it. All right, so I remember in the past, basically what I did is I moved the sync var to the namer script, which is on the client instance, before it was actually on the player name script, which is on the player itself. So what's going on with this is it's probably okay. So yeah, now the server is also calling the set name method. I don't think synchronized name is, oh, it is still a sync var. Okay, yes, that's right. So what this is doing is basically, I think, calling on the server when it shouldn't be. I'm just checking out stuff. Going back here. This isn't really important. So if you have questions, this is a really good time to ask your questions because I'm just basically fixing something from before. Well, that really depends on your question or your usage, I guess. Like if you look at FPS land, for example, I don't use network animator or flex network animator. FNA actually wasn't around when I made FPS land. But besides the point, ideally, if you want to be the most efficient as possible, you'll hook your animations off from other RPC calls. Like for example, if you fire your weapon and you want to do like a recoil animation or something using the animator, then instead of updating your animator over using and then relying on like network animator or FNA to update it, you would instead use the fire call to update the animator. And logically, other players are going to need to know when someone fires too, right? So whenever the other players get that fire call, they would also update the animator locally, and you're skipping the whole network animator altogether. That's the most efficient way to do it, both performance and bandwidth wise. and that's in that case, I would definitely recommend doing something like RPCs for animations. Now, if you mean uh, something like sending RPCs individually for animations, like instead of using the FNA, for example, and just being like, okay, update float and then passing in the hash and then the new value or whatever, I don't recommend that. Merely because FNA uses a lot of optimizations to perform very efficiently. It's designed to cause near zero impact on performance, and because it compresses the heck out of things, it's really well optimized and as far as compression and stuff. I'm sorry, Bob, I don't speak your language. Sorry, I only understand English. If you can run it through a translator for me, I will answer your question. Yeah, I figured it was Russian. I just didn't want to assume. But I don't actually speak Russian. So if you understand English, I hope you can understand that I have no idea what you're saying. I know US is like one of the few countries that it's not really common to speak more than one language, and that's kind of embarrassing, but they never really taught us any other languages in our schooling system, to be honest. You have to like elect for it, where in a lot of different countries it's mandatory. I think it should be mandatory, but it's not. So, I could always learn on my own, but ain't nobody got time for that, really. Oh, so about this error, the player name is updated both on the server and the client. So that's probably why it's being funny. So all I'm gonna do is just change the change this right here. I don't think I actually have to do. I think all I have to do is just this. I'm gonna make sure it's working real quick though. Open up another build. I'm gonna run this as client host first to do a test. A's, join another client. I can see that it's A, this is B, that's working. Let's just do another quick update. Add another A on there, that's working. Add another B on there. Okay, so that's working. I presume if I join another client, it's gonna be right. Yeah, so let's just do it server only, just to make sure. I just saw another warning message too. Okay, rename that to A, and the server doesn't actually keep track of the names, so it shouldn't matter. Yeah, so that's working. How did I get that error message or that warning? I think it was like on the client host. There we go. Oh, that's just a client host bug. I'm not going to worry about that. Okay. It's not really a bug. It's just a warning. It's trying to send an RPC when the player disconnected, when the player is actually the server. So therefore it can't send the RPC. So whatever. All right. Stream is basically done. Oh, by the way, all I did with this is, I know I just kind of fixed it and I didn't really say much, is the set name is actually, I don't even think this is used anymore. No, it's not even used anymore. What's the set name? This is on the player. Keep in mind, this is on the player object to update the UI. And I covered this, I think modified it, I should say, last stream. The set name is called both on the server and the client. So I just basically set the synchronized name to whatever's passed in, and it's a sync var, update the clients. And this is on the actual client instance, which I set as a static object. And this is also run on both clients and servers. So if you update the name here, then it updates on your object and across the server, because where is it? Server current name. As you can see, that's also a sync var. So yeah, any other questions? Questions. I want to look at my Trello here and see what's next. That might have actually been it. Let me check. Pick up pet. That was the pet follow stuff. AI pet. I have AI enemies on here, but I'm not going to do that because the enemies would basically just be another version of the pet, where it would essentially, it would do pretty much the exact same thing, except instead of requiring owner, it would just attack whoever regardless. So I'm not going to really do the enemies. I do have visibility on here. That's an important thing to cover. And I also have game modes. I don't know if I'm going to cover game modes because that's going to be so unique per game. And it just seems like that. I think if I do like a game mode or something, it won't really cover a lot. I guess I'm saying is a lot of people won't find it useful because their game mode code will be unique per their project. So I don't think I'm going to be able to generalize it. So I'm going to take game modes off from the checklist. The next one is visibility, and that is very important, but it's also very easy to cover. So I think I'll be doing that next stream, of course. And I don't have anything else on the list. And again, let me give you that Trello here. Here's the Trello. That's the last thing on the Trello. If you want to hop into my Discord just for the heck of it, let me get you my Discord link. Here's my Discord. So if you have any suggestions or whatever to this series before it ends, because right now the last thing is visibility, and that's probably going to be relatively short. Let me know, because tomorrow is my partner's day off, which means it's my day off. So you'll have about a day and a half or so to think of something if you want it on there, and to let me know. The reason I won't do a generalized game mode like PvE versus PvP is because how that plays out will be entirely dependent upon the game. Like, what is PvE versus PvP? Are you just fighting bots? That means I'm gonna have to like rip out all the leaderboard stuff because you're not really fighting players at that point, and so on. I just don't think there's any way I can really generalize that in a sense that can be short and useful at the same time. So I just don't really see any reason to cover game modes in that sense. Hey Paco, how's it going? Alrighty, so I'm gonna hop off here. This stream was about 2 hours, so I'm gonna take a break. What I think I'll do next, just for fun, if anyone is interested, when I do get back on, I will probably stream working on Flex Network Animator. It's not going to be really educational or anything like that. I mean, it might be educational. I guess it's educational if you're learning stuff, but it's not really meant to accomplish anything. I'm just going to stream it if anyone's curious about what my work looks like in a project that's actually refined. So I'm going to go ahead and hop off now. I will probably start that in like an hour or so. And I will post a link both in the Mirror server as well my own. Just a heads up though, the FNA content will be one and done. So it's not going to stay live, or it's not going to stay on my thing. It's just if you're bored and you want to watch, then it'll be there. That's all it is. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and hop off. If you have any questions, please ask me on Discord. And like I said, I'm going to take a break, so I might not get back right away, but I will definitely do so afterwards. All right, see ya.